before we get into it, because I love your cup so much, before we get into it, I want to mention I want the Blue Beetle action figure, right? So I looked it up. They have one that comes with different hands and his big sword, right?
Wow.
But they have another one that doesn't come with the sword and instead comes with the wings. So in order for you to get him with wings and the sword, you have to buy two action figure. I'm so mad, but girl, I'm gonna do it.
I love that line from Barbie because I also saw Barbie last night. And I love that
Also
line from
very,
Barbie
also
of
very
like,
Mexican. If you need to go back
yes.
and figure out, go back to one of our previous episodes. Very Mexican.
That line of like, I lost the outfit and my mom wouldn't let me buy the same Barbie again so that I could have the outfit again. So
Hmm.
my beef with so many of the reviews are that people are like, oh yes, it's good, but, and that but is always like, oh, but there's so much superhero fatigue right now, and oh, they released it like when nobody cares anymore about superheroes, and it's like none of that is the movie's fault. So it's
Hmm.
like almost as if they were putting all of the drama of superhero movies lately and how bad they've done and how bad they've been onto a movie that is 100% not that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like almost as if they're talking like, oh, Flash was so bad, and so now nobody cares about Blue Beetle. And it's like, well, okay, but Blue Beetle is not Flash and it's not bad. So what are you
Yeah.
really talking about? You know what I mean? It's almost like they don't. I sound so like conspiracy theorist, but it's almost as if they don't want to see it succeed
Hmm.
because it has everything to succeed. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
not a bad movie. It doesn't look like all of the things that some, especially film buffs have been complaining about lately of Marvel movies and stuff. Like everything looks muddy and colorless and desaturated and all of that.
This
Like
movie is super colorful.
this is so colorful, and like
How you
all
gonna
of
make a
these,
movie called Blue Beetle and not have it be
yes,
colorful?
and all of these things of like, for example, somebody screen capped like the suit like mid transformation and said like, oh, the CGI looks bad, and it's like almost like taking the worst frame out of like every single other frame around it, which looks perfect, and it's like that's mean spirited and that's shady.
Yeah, that's like pausing it on a cartoon, like a hand drawn cartoon.
Yes, exactly.
When someone's like,
Yeah.
right,
The
like,
Simpson memes that they've been doing lately.
yeah,
But it's like I saw it and I was like, oh, I'm waiting for the CGI to get bad, and it never did.
it wasn't bad.
Like
I
it
felt like
looks
the
so good.
practical, I felt like the practical suit combined with when it needed to be CG worked really well together.
The
Like,
mix between everything that you could notice that was real and those like moments of CGI, that's the fantasy. You know what I mean? Like that's something
yeah,
that Hollywood has forgotten lately. That is like, oh no, you don't have to do everything CGI. You just have to put the CGI in the precise moment so that we don't notice it, because
yeah,
we're so focused on everything else. And like it's the bar is so low right now that it's like, oh, the sets are real. It's
yeah,
not like everything. There are some green screen, obviously, but it's not like everything is green screen. No. They can touch the furniture. That's how that's how low the bar is. But
I did you
um,
catch the Kronos?
so it's because from the moment that the first trailer dropped, that we saw the hand with the bug, I was like, oh, this is
Hmm.
a Kronos. But the fact that they acknowledge it by putting it like for a flash for a second on TV, Macario and Kronos, and then reference Macario
Hmm.
and Kronos.
Later with all the like
Yes,
candles, right?
yes.
Yeah,
And I want
that's
to talk about
beautiful.
I want to talk about the soundtrack, because usually when you get like a Latino movie, Hollywood, they just like fill it with the most Latino songs they can find, but like they don't. It's almost like to bring it back to Drag Race. It's almost like what Shangela said about Trixie's impersonation of RuPaul, which is like, yeah, you have the RuPaul isms, but they don't make any sense. They're not in the right
Yeah,
place. And so I feel like Hollywood does that a lot. It's like, oh, Latino songs, boom, and they just put it everywhere. But here, every single song was so carefully selected from the funny to the sad, because for example, having Luis Miguel, like a beachy Luis Miguel song, for the summer. The moment when you see like Jaime in this big mansion and you think like, oh, he made it, for a split second. It's like, yeah, that would be kind of like the summer vibe of like somebody young with money, it would be very
Yeah.
Luis Miguel, which is like kind of like ridiculous in itself, but it's also kind of cool, it's kind of like a campy cool. And then when he's gonna talk to his dad, and it's like this poignant moment, like when they talk in the yard about like the house and everything. They have Gracias a la Vida, in the back, and it's like, oh God, not this song. It's like it's so specifically devastating for like talking about your family, and talking about like your relationship with your family and being grateful with life. So it's like
I
it's a
I
great
even
song.
loved I even loved one of my favorite songs is Be My Baby by the Ronettes.
And they
And
had the Spanish cover. Like I love
yeah,
that
it was
because
so
okay,
good.
so Americans might not know this like at all, but in the 60s and 70s, and even way after, but like in the 60s and 70s, it was very specific that rock bands and like kind of like girl bands, like the Supremes and stuff like that in Mexico and in Latin America, they covered like all of the hits, from the US. We have them, but in Spanish,
Yeah.
and also some bands from the US and from Europe and stuff like that would cover their own songs in Spanish. So for example, we have Quiero Ser Tu Baby, but like in Spanish. And for example, Dusty Springfield, like Angelica Maria has like the Dusty Springfield covers, and
Yeah.
it's a whole thing. But and then in the 80s and 90s, it would still keep happening, but with Italian and French songs. They will import them and translate them into Spanish. And then 20 years later, you would be like, is it supposed to be a French song? Like I didn't know that. So yeah, the soundtrack is great.
I will say that even my husband, who's not Mexican, laughed when at one point he passes out, and to wake him up, they put Vicks under his nose. It was so good.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
yes. Everything is just like I wanna watch it like several more times. Like I feel like it's one of those, for some reason, like I love the idea of everything being connected, but also when we get a standalone superhero movie, that's the one that I rewatch. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
I have rewatched Black Panther, the first one, so much, not just because I like it and it's like probably my favorite MCU movie, but because I can just watch it and like not worry about like, oh, I don't remember who is this supposed to be and what is this
Well, so
supposed to be
like,
doing and stuff like that.
did you notice like the only connection I saw? Well, I mean, they mentioned Batman, right? But
Yeah,
then he's wearing a sweater that says
yeah.
Gotham University. I'm like, that's fine, but like,
I
it's
like
not.
what some, because it has happened in the MCU and the DCU when they just go like, yes, is it the same world? And like people just live there, like you know what I mean, like people are just doing their lives, and like Batman is somewhere else doing something, you know what I mean, and I like that
Yeah.
because I feel like that gives them more opportunity to like just introduce a bunch of people, a bunch of heroes, and don't worry about how they're gonna team up later,
Yeah. Mhm.
I remember, for example, I like that I haven't seen the second Shazam, which apparently is pretty bad, but I like the first Shazam precisely because of that. It's just like kids who grew up in a world where Superman exists, so
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. All right. Anything else you
Um,
want to say about Blue Beetle?
I mean, I love Harry again. That's the gay connection that we have.
Yeah,
And also that, of course, Sholo is absolutely fucking gorgeous.
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, well,
I
th-
mentioned on Twitter, sorry, I mentioned on Twitter a quick thing that I just kept going on in my mind because I was like, when Susan Sarandon walked in, like in the first scene, I was like, oh my god, Susan Sarandon, that's cool. I didn't know she was in the movie. And
oh, did you
and
not watch
then
the? Oh, you don't watch trailers, do
I
you?
only watched the first one and then I never watch it again. Like I do that. I do that with like big blockbusters so that I don't
Mm.
get like, yeah. Um, so I was like, oh, Susan Sarandon is in this movie, and then as the scenes kept happening, I was like, she looks like she's in her Sylvia Pasquel era. Sylvia Pasquel is Alejandra Guzman's sister, and they are both Silvia Pinal's daughters. So Silvia Pinal is kind of like, this is gonna sound blasphemous for some of you, but like it's kind of like Maria Felix, because Silvia Pinal has been around since the golden age of Mexican cinema, and she has made so many classics with like Luis Buñuel and like big directors like that. And so she had two daughters. She had more daughters, I think, but I only remember two of them, which were Alejandra Guzman and Silvia Pasquel. Silvia Pasquel is an actress of cinema and TV, and Alejandra Guzman, we know Alejandra Guzman as a singer, and Silvia Pasquel, like I tweeted a photo because it's like Susan Sarandon looks so much like Silvia Pasquel in this movie, but she also is giving me like the Soraya Montenegro kind of like severe Bob, kind of like very 80s. And it's like this telenovela villain look, because Silvia Pasquel often plays villains. And so it's like this telenovela villain look, it cannot be a coincidence, because they acknowledge so much of Mexican TV that there's no way that they didn't go like, we need to, like an abuela watching this needs to go like, oh, she's a bad guy. Like immediately,
Yeah.
And so she's giving me very much that. So that's also very gay.
Totally.
Yeah. I was thinking of how how the kids, the children, the brother and sister are so very much Chicano, so very much, very Americanized, and the families is still very much Mexican. And it's this thing of like, well, I just it just kind of hit me at once that the reason why maybe when you look at Chicano families, they're not like quote unquote real Mexican, is because they have to be Mexican in a world, like in a country where they cannot find the same products, they cannot find the same food, they cannot find the same clothes, they cannot find the same than you. So it's like you don't see them as real Mexican. You don't see them as real Mexican because they don't need the same tortillas as you. But at the end of the day, they're eating tortillas. It's just that they cannot find the same ones as you. They cannot walk to a tortilleria. You know what I mean?
Ask
so
Lolita how Mexican she feels living in France.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, it's this thing of yes, we're all Mexican wherever we go in the world. The only difference is that we take whatever we can from around us and we recreate our Mexican culture. And that's how you get all these things that don't feel Mexican to some people, but they are at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So anyway.
Yeah.